Hi all, round 5 of the US Chess Championship was particularly exciting. A lot of bloodthirsty games, a lot of wins. And in this round we had also Gata Kamsky playing Robson. Gata Kamsky, at the time of the game, 40 years old, Russian, but a citizen of the United States. He's really been around the block. He's played in World Championship matches against Anatoly Karpov in the past. And Robson playing black is much younger, 20 years old, so half his age, born October 25th, 1994. So this is a clash of generations, as well as relatively same FIDE ratings actually. Gata Kamsky 2683, Robson 2656, so on FIDE ratings quite close together. So Gata kicks off with d4, after knight f6, knight f3, d5. Were the fans going to be tortured with the dreaded London system? He wasn't really going to play this. Please no London system. Thankfully c4 was played. Yes, c4. So c6, and now we have e3, a modest move, closing in the bishop. e6, bishop d3. So white has a small advantage, though. He has the possibility of opening up the game later with some preparation of e4, you'd think. D takes c4, although it sort of relieves the grip on e4, it means actually that this bishop can be used as a tempo gainer for sometimes stuff like this. Bishop b7 later to put this bishop on this diagonal. And we see that plan actually with a6 now immediately after castles b5, so giving b7 at the square for that bishop on c8. Bishop drops back, c5. So black's only developed a piece, but he's sorting out his bishops now. We see an immediate a4, trying to encourage black to weaken that c4 square, which he does. b4, and yes, that c4 square is weakened. White plays a very dynamic, aggressive move here. It's very easy to get into a passive position here with an isolated queen's pawn if it's not played energetically. This is a very, very energetic, aggressive continuation now. Gata Kamsky plays e4. He's temporarily sacrificing the d4 pawn to try and dislodge this knight away from f6, and that would in turn weaken this diagonal, like h7 would be slightly weaker. So we see this happening. C takes d4. It's a very common move. e5, knight d5, and white takes time to get the pawn back immediately here with knight takes d4. So the knight does seem to have a nice square on d5. Bishop b7. Black's bishops are quite healthy here, and the structure isn't too bad, and it seems also with this pawn on b4 that's quite useful as well as a space advantage on the queen side. So there doesn't seem too many downsides, but on the other hand c4 has been compromised. If a knight can go like this or even to e4, that could be dangerous later. We see for the moment rook e1, and note with this knight here there's also the queen is free to come to these two squares. Black maybe was a bit cautious here. He played actually g6, taking time out to fianchetto before castling. You might think, well, why not bishop e7? Yes, this could be a little bit dangerous. For example, like this with queen g4, g6, knight c4. If we look at this, you see that bishop h6 is going to be useful for white, and potentially this is quite a dangerous position with things like knight takes e6 now on the cards. This is dangerous for these dark squares around the king, and if black plays a routine bishop f8, this is the sort of thing that could happen. Potentially a horrible knight could get to d6. That would be a dark square disaster for black on the cards. Yeah, Robson's choice does weaken further some dark squares, you could argue. And so white's plan when he sees this fianchetto is naturally to try and later get rid of this defensive bishop on g7. For the moment, knight d2. After bishop g7, there are two ways of potentially supporting e5 if necessary with this knight here or here to bear in mind, but it's waiting there. It doesn't commit to either square yet. we see instead getting the queen out to g4. Why not? So the queen can start targeting some vulnerable spots. These three come into mind. If the queen's on the h file, h7, but on this diagonal e6 all the time, it seems e6, g6 and h7 are under great scrutiny here. We see knight d7 looking at e5. Now white can protect this pawn in two ways. He protected it with knight to f3, which is a little bit curious. When knight c4, it seems, is a little bit more aggressive. It's not only protecting the pawn, but could come to d6. It's very interesting that this didn't happen, knight c4. It seems, that would be a logical outcome of a4, b4, weakening that c4 earlier. If, for example, castles bishop g5, this seems fairly pleasant for white, especially with this extra on the queen here, for example, this position. Seems very pleasant. It seems black would have to be very careful here. But intriguingly, knight 2 to f3 was played. So the knight hasn't got the ambition to try and make use of that d6 square. I want to show you something very technical about this decision, which actually is a tactical justification of knight c4. If castles bishop g5, I mentioned queen c7, which you might think is ludicrous, but on queen b8, this could suffer tactically to things like this. Knight takes e6, takes, queen takes, rook f7, and now knight d6. This kind of tactic becomes available as well. So it's not just a pretty idea to get the knight to d6, it can actually be part of quite a crushing combination like this, just to win material. So that's one of the tactical justifications. But anyway, let's go on with the game. Knight 2 to f3, black castled, and now the queen goes to h3. So it seems all the time these three pieces are looking, well, four are looking at all of these soft spots, e6, g6, h7, and they're looking to come in to probe these a bit more. We see now rook e8, which supports against any knight takes e6 sacrifice, but now white tries to get rid of that defensive bishop h6. So for the moment it looks like a sort of position black seems devoid at the moment of significant counterplay. White has a stranglehold on the e5 square and has, it seems, a lot of pieces crudely looking at the black king. A very exciting game. Yeah, so rook c8 was played here. Something like bishop h8, you might think, to avoid the exchange here. White can actually use this as a tempo game. Bishop d2 now means knight g5 without h6 is possible, as the bishop was supporting h6. If the bishop has to go back, for knight g5 h6, then here knight g5 h6, things could get nasty. For example, like this, taking, and bishop takes g6, and this could be very unpleasant for black. Things are dropping off. All these sensitive points in black's position can be potentially exploited. Black has to tread extremely carefully and not lose important tempo. So bishop h8 might be pushing things too far. Black immediately just plays rook c8, just saying, okay, take my defensive bishop if you want. We have now a5 on this side of the board, preventing the use of the b6 square, fixing the a6 pawn. Queen e7, and now this bishop is taken, but it not only weakens black, it weakens white. Black is immediately now threatening knight f4, forking the queen and the bishop on d3. White now takes time out here, queen g3, keeping the grip on e5 though, but the queen is away from h7. So for the moment, black's defense around his king seems a little bit more comfortable now. G6 seems solid enough, that triangle. E6 is secure enough. There's no major disaster, it seems, on the cards at the moment. But white's plan will be to soften up the structure with h4, h5. Black, though, tries to get some queenside counterplay now in this position. He plays b3. b3 potentially supports knight maneuvers like this. So fixing down this pawn. Also, if this pawn can be attacked later, something like this, if the rook wasn't on there, you could imagine the queen side being subject to some scrutiny at least. But we see white playing on the king side, you could say the word crudely could be used here, because yes, but it seems justified. The queen seems very comfortably parked now on g3, just eyeing this triangle structure, which white just wants to soften. But black tries to react quickly now on the queen side. Knight b4 is played, and white volunteers the light square bishop with rook ad1. That would actually mean maybe b3 is a little bit weaker though, if that's taken, rook takes, and that would seem pleasant also on the d file potentially. And here's a very, very crucial moment in the game where it's like queen side versus king side attack, and this may be a significant inaccuracy here. Black took on f3, giving up his light square bishop. It seems in this position that a rook was away from the a4 square, so this kind of maneuver is possible. It seems in this position knight c5 is interesting. Here, if the bishop tried to discourage knight a4, then there's knight e4 hitting the bishop and hitting the queen, the bishop supporting the e4 knight. But what happened in the game is a little bit of a tragedy in its own right. Black, by taking on f3, now introduces a different possibility which didn't exist there. Black's losing control of the e4 square a bit. White took with the knight here. He doesn't want to get involved in the complexities of giving up the h pawn. If queen takes, this is a bit crazy stuff for white. Maybe trying to get a draw here, looking at that d7. That's just crazy lines there, which might be sufficient for a draw. No, he takes with the knight, but now the power behind knight c5 is a bit less than before, because here white has a key resource which didn't exist before to slow down black on the queen side. In particular, this pawn is a convenient target for black, but what does white play here to slow down black's queenside attack? Can you see it's a key move here? And not only is it defensive, it's kind of attacking as well, again putting scrutiny on this structure. Can you see the move if I give you 5 seconds starting from now? Okay, bishop c4, yeah, because there's no knight e4. On knight e4 we can play rook takes, just defending the bishop, and that's a bit unfortunate. It means now knight a4, black loses that key pawn, which could have been really useful to support c2. If we just look at the importance of this again, just for a moment, if the bishop wasn't relinquished, so knight c5, say bishop, so bishop c4 is out of the question. Bishop b1, things could get fun here for black, like this. Then knight c2, and this position would seem extremely pleasant for black. His queenside counterplay seems quite significant. b2 is under scrutiny and essentially blocked. The protection is blocked. The kingside attack is also a bit snuffed out. So yeah, it's about both sides trying to destroy each other's play on either side of the board and continue with their own attack, if possible. So yeah, bishop takes f3. Unfortunately, yeah, it allowed this sneaky resource in the position, bishop c4. And now we have a different picture of things. Without this b3 pawn, it isn't so much fun for black. So black plays knight a4 here. White was also, going to just build up potentially here with rook d6 in any case, and then carry on with h5 and try and soften up these two squares. So yeah, black goes for knight a4, giving up that b3 pawn, and it's a totally different picture now. Instead of white having a really passive position, here after rook d6, we've got two attacking pieces on e6 again. We've still got this h5. We've got knight g5 potentially probing f7, e6 and h7, or alternatively rerouting to f6. f6 is a weak dark square here. So all the prospects here, look at white's pieces. They're actually much more aggressive than in that other version of the game. And it's all started with that small inaccuracy, you could argue. Bishop takes f3 instead of first knight c5 to try and get the bishop on b1. Yeah, it's the nature of chess. It's these very seemingly trivial differences that actually make huge amount of differences here. Rook c3 pinning the knight, but that's unpinned, and Gata Gata Kamsky is not too concerned here about having doubled pawns. Although it looks a wreck, he's more concerned about trying to get his attack going on the soft spots and trying to get a knight potentially to f6 or some sort of attack like this or like this. We see black playing rook c8 now. It's a very, very difficult position. h5. White's attack is full steam ahead now. Knight 2 to d3. Knight g5, and it's immediately threatening things like hg and knight takes. This is very, very dangerous stuff going on here against black's defences, and this position causes black a major panic reaction. But it's actually a fundamentally difficult position. So although we could take the Hitchhiker's Guide motto, don't panic, and say, okay, has black got a calm defense? In fact, white has got immense pressure here on all of these soft spots, not just hg but h6. All of his pieces are in the attack here, and at what cost? He's got weakened pawns, but the pawns, if he mates the king, so what about the pawn structure? So this is the point where it seems an absolutely ludicrous type move here. King h6 was played. Yes, black is threatening, it seems, to munch the knight with assistance from the king himself. The king steps out. But let's have a look at this position for a moment. If king h8, it's funny here that hg check is devastating. Yeah, so you can't afford that line opening. Yeah, black's going to get mated like that. So it's not so easy to defend this. If knight c5, there's something quite amazing about this position as well, which seemingly tries to defend things very well. But it seems hg Engine's come up with a crushing move in this position, which you might have thought was tenable, because the queen can be defended, with rook h8 potentially sometimes. But actually here there's a crushing tactical blow. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, it's actually rook d4. It's actually double attacking b4 and h4 for h7. So there's a double attack with an opportunity there and a concrete piece there. An opportunity for rook h4 for h7. If, for example, rook h8, rook f4, and this is actually winning by force, getting the rook away from the h1, and then rook h4 is winning. Yeah, it's actually a really crushing tactical blow in this position, rook d4. Yeah, so the h-file is pretty dangerous on hg. This use of the h-file, that's what these variations kind of demonstrate. And also, if rook d8, then here there's a crushing blow as well. Can you spot it? If I give you 5 seconds here. Okay, bishop takes e6, and black's being blown apart here, just losing material, etc. So this is not a very pleasant position, and the panic reaction is kind of justified by all these attacking pieces. So things have really got out of control to allow white, with all this attacking pressure and with no kind of queenside counterplay, doesn't really mean anything anymore. The double pawns don't really mean anything with black's king about to be slaughtered. So yeah, black's king steps out. We have knight e4, potentially going into f6 now. And black tries to defend that for a moment. Knight d5. This is a pretty hopeless move. It's just snapped off. E takes. Rook takes with tempo gain on the knight. We see the knight defended like this, indirectly. But now knight f6, and this is really, really horrible. e5 is still protected by these two guys. Black can't even play rook takes d5 because, if I give you 5 seconds, knight g8 check. Yes, what's the king doing on h6? So this is just horrible. So white is actually material up, technically, a pawn up, but he's after the king here. The king steps back, but now we have hg, queen h4, slaughter time on the h-file. And not only that, the unfortunate thing here is the queen is also loose in this position. On rook h8, knight h5 check forces king f8, but here I think there's a key resource. Can you spot it? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Rook d8 check. Yes, that would be mating, as well as winning the queen. So black's really quite busted. He actually chose instead knight takes e5. Now, yeah, is that an upgrade on that? Not particularly. Well, because white just plays rook takes d8, leaving the queen on d8 here. So black resigned in this position. On queen takes, there's knight h5 check. So winning the queen like that. Okay, so it's not particularly helping. On knight h5 here, though, king f8, that doesn't look particularly good either, to be honest, because a rook takes d8. Yes, it wasn't a particularly nice position in the end, in any case. Possibly Ray was hoping to sacrifice his queen here after the check. So if king f8 is ruled out with rook d8, sacrificing the queen like this to get 2 pieces. But even this position here is difficult for black. Check, can mop up a bit, and yeah, white should be a little bit better, but yeah, this is possibly what Ray was hoping for. Yeah, but the game continuation, just rook takes d8, is just much clearer. On queen takes f6, by the way, there's also here queen h8 is pretty good, checkmate, or we can just win the queen with rook g8. That's another for those interested. Okay, yes, interesting stuff there at the end. Okay, yeah, it was a case where Gata Kamsky played like a real tiger. He didn't just play, he didn't just not play the London system. He got all his pieces attacking sensitive points and had a really vicious attack. Incredible. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.